She did not inherit a throne. She fought for one. She was not born into safety. She was born into a dynasty rotting from the inside. A family so consumed by murder, betrayal, and paranoia that she watched her own siblings try to kill her before she was 20 years old. And yet, she looked at the most powerful empire the ancient world had ever seen and decided she would make it hers. She conquered two of the greatest military commanders in human history, not on a battlefield, but in a way far more dangerous. She used everything she had: her mind, her power, her body, her brilliance. And in the end, it still wasn't enough. Today's story is one of the most told in history, and yet almost everything you think you know about it has been filtered through the voices of her enemies, written by the men who destroyed her, mythologized by the poets who romanticized her fall, reduced again and again to a seductress, a woman defined by the men she loved rather than the empire she fought to protect. That ends here. Because the real Cleopatra's seventh Philopator was not a romantic figure stumbling through history on charm and beauty. She was a strategist, a linguist who spoke 9 languages in a court that rarely bothered to learn even one, a naval commander, a political architect operating inside a world designed entirely to destroy her. This is the story of how she rose, how she nearly won everything, and what it ultimately cost her to try. She was born approximately 69 BC into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek royal family that had ruled Egypt for 2.5 centuries. Ever since Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy claimed the kingdom after Alexander's death. By her time, the dynasty was deeply unstable. Egypt was technically sovereign, but it existed under the long shadow of Rome, that vast, hungry republic consuming the known world piece by piece. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was nicknamed Auletes, the flute player, a man so desperate for Roman recognition that he paid an almost incomprehensible bribe to Julius Caesar and Pompey to legitimize his reign. He drained Egypt's treasury. He alienated his own people. And when he was temporarily exiled by an Alexandrian revolt, his daughter Berenice IV seized the throne and had him deposed. When Auletes returned with Roman soldiers, he had Berenice executed. This is the household Cleopatra grew up in. Power was not given, it was taken, and the cost of losing it was death. When her father died in 51 BC, Cleopatra, now roughly 18 years old, was forced by the terms of his will to rule jointly with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. In Egyptian tradition, a queen could not reign alone. She needed a male co-regent, even a child. Within months, her brother's powerful advisors, Pothinus, Achilles, Theodotus, had consolidated influence around the young king and begun systematically dismantling her authority. By 48 BC, she had been driven out of Alexandria entirely. Cleopatra was in exile, alone, assembling an army on the eastern border. But she had not come this far to disappear. She needed a weapon. And the most powerful weapon in the world had just arrived on Egyptian shores. Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt in 48 BC, pursuing his defeated rival Pompey, only to be handed Pompey's severed head as a gift by the advisors of the young Ptolemy XIII. Caesar reportedly wept, not out of grief exactly, but because Pompey had been a Roman consul, a general, and killing him without a trial was an affront to Roman dignity and to Caesar's own carefully cultivated image of magnanimity. He had come to Egypt in the middle of a civil war with a relatively small force in foreign territory, surrounded by the court of a child king whose advisors already despised him. And that is when Cleopatra made her move. The story of her being smuggled inside a rolled carpet, or more accurately, a linen sack, has passed into legend so many times it risks feeling theatrical. But consider what it actually was. She crossed enemy lines. She risked capture, humiliation, or execution. She arrived at Caesar's private quarters at night, unannounced, alone. That is not seduction. That is audacity. Whatever passed between them in that first meeting, by morning Caesar had aligned himself with Cleopatra. He would restore her to the throne of Egypt. In return, she would pay Egypt's outstanding debts to Rome. The political arithmetic was brutal and clear, but there was more than politics happening. Cleopatra was 21. Caesar was 52. He was, at this moment, arguably the most powerful man in the Roman world. And she needed him, not as a lover first, but as a shield. Whatever love grew between them was real enough. In 47 BC, she gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy Caesar. The Alexandrians called him Caesarion, Little Caesar. And this child, this living proof of their union, became both her greatest triumph and one of her most dangerous gambles, because Caesar returned to Rome with no public acknowledgement of the boy, with no ring, with no promise. She followed him there, lived in his villa across the Tiber, was received with unease, even contempt, by Roman society, who regarded her as a foreign queen, wielding too much influence over their greatest general. And then, on the Ides of March, 44 BC, Julius Caesar was assassinated on the floor of the Senate. She was in Rome when it happened. Think about what that means. She was a foreign queen in enemy territory, carrying the child of a man who had just been murdered by the most powerful senators in the Republic. There was no safety net, no army within reach, no Caesar. She fled back to Egypt within weeks. In Alexandria, she had her remaining brother and co-regent, Ptolemy XIV, quietly eliminated, possibly poisoned. She elevated Caesarion as her co-ruler. The message was unmistakable. The bloodline of Caesar lived, and it lived in Egypt under her protection, because she knew that whoever emerged from Rome's civil war would eventually come looking for Egypt, for its grain, for its gold, for her. And she intended to be ready.